I only grabbed my phone to check my alarm, but 3 transaction alerts glowed on the dark screen. 3 business-class tickets purchased at 2:17 in the morning for a destination I had never visited. It looked like a standard hack until the recovery email popped up, belonging to my mother. Now, my entire family waits downstairs, convinced I am having a mental breakdown over $860, unaware I am holding the bank statements that prove they stole my identity. My name is Paisley Miles. I am 31 years old, and my world is built on order. My apartment in downtown Minneapolis is a testament to this. The skyline outside my floor-to-ceiling windows is a precise grid of steel and glass, a perfect reflection of the life I have built inside. My floors are polished concrete. My counters are stainless steel. My furniture is chosen in deliberate shades of gray, white, and chrome. There are no piles of mail on the table. There are no stray shoes by the door. Everything has a place, and every place serves a purpose. I am a forensic auditor for the Atlas Compliance Group. My job is to look at chaos. I look at the messy, emotional, desperate attempts people make to hide money, to create false trails, to obscure the truth, and I reduce it all to a clean, indisputable number. I find discrepancies. I follow digital footprints. I trust data, not people. Data does not lie. It does not get sentimental. It does not forget. And it does not make excuses. My life is a balanced ledger. This morning began as it always does. My alarm, a soft chime, sounded at exactly 5:30 a.m. I do not use the snooze button. I swung my legs out of bed, my feet landing on the cool, smooth floor. The city outside was still a deep blue, just beginning to glow at the horizon. In the kitchen, the process was automatic, a ritual of precision. Single-origin coffee beans, ground precisely, water heated to exactly 195 degrees, the pour-over method, a slow, controlled bloom and drip. While the coffee steeped, I reviewed my schedule for the day, a 9 a.m. meeting with the legal department, a 12:30 p.m. data integrity review for a new client, a final audit submission due by 5. My suit, a charcoal gray, perfectly pressed, was already hanging on the valet stand. My work bag was packed by the door, laptop secured, encrypted drives settled, files in order. At 5:47, as I was taking my first, measured sip of coffee, my phone vibrated on the quartz countertop. It was not the short, quick buzz of a text message, nor the long, continuous rattle of an incoming call. It was the heavy, insistent thump, thump, thump of a financial alert. Then another. Then a third. I put the mug down. The silence of the apartment seemed to sharpen. I stared at the screen. 3 notifications from Pioneer National Trust. 3 identical alerts for a large, undisclosed amount, all processed in the deep void of the night. I unlocked my phone, my thumbprint, a unique biometric key. I opened the banking app. Pending charges. My breath did not gasp. It simply stopped. It froze in my chest. $3,942.16. $3,942.16. $3,942.16. The transactions were time-stamped, 2:17 in the morning. I tapped the first charge, vendor, Aurora Skies. My mind raced, booting up like a computer. I had not booked a flight. I had not been researching travel. I had certainly not been awake at 2:17, purchasing anything. I clicked for more details, my finger moving with detached precision. Route, Chicago O'Hare to Santorini, Greece, class, business. And then, the passenger list. Passenger 1, Ray Miles. Passenger 2, Linda Miles. Passenger 3, Logan Miles. My father, my mother, my brother. The world tilted, just slightly, a misalignment in the columns. This was not a random fraudster in Russia or China. This was my family. I tried to make it make sense. Had I sleep-booked tickets? Impossible. My phone requires a passcode. Had I given them my card number? No, I never give anyone my card. I had not spoken to them about a European vacation since. The login. My focus narrowed. I went to my laptop, still sitting open on the counter from last night's final check of my work email. I opened the browser. First, Atlas Compliance Group, my work portal. My fingers flew across the keys. A complex string of characters. I was in, secure, locked down, fine. Second, my personal Gmail. I typed the password, the same complex, 32-character string I used for all my personal high-security accounts. The screen refreshed. A small red line of text appeared. Incorrect password. Try again or click Forgot password to reset it. A flicker of irritation. I typed it again. Slower, checking each character. Incorrect password. And beneath that, a new line. One that made the blood drain from my face and pool. Cold, in my stomach. Your password was changed approximately 1 hour ago. At 4:30 a.m., roughly 2 hours after the tickets were purchased. This was not a mistake. This was not an accident. This was a coordinated event. This was an intrusion. I clicked Forgot Password. My options appeared. Send a verification code to my phone number. Send a code to my recovery email. I chose my phone. It was in my hand. It was secure. The code buzzed in. 6 digits. I entered them. Create a new password. I created a new one, 40 characters, randomly generated. I typed it, memorized it, and confirmed it. Google logged me in. A large, helpful security alert box popped up. A recent security event. It showed the password change. It showed the login location, an IP address originating from a suburb near my parents' home, not my downtown apartment. And then, the detail that stopped my heart. The recovery email address used for this password change was l.miles.mom@oldmail.net. My mother's email, an ancient account she had used since I was in middle school, an account I had not had linked to my Gmail in at least a decade. They had not just guessed my password. They had been inside my account. They had known enough to navigate my security settings, add their own recovery email, and then use that email to lock me out after they had finished their theft. The daughter in me wanted to scream. She wanted to throw the coffee mug against the wall. But the auditor took over. The auditor does not get emotional. The auditor collects evidence. My movements became precise, economical. Action 1. I took a screenshot of the Google security alert. I saved it. I noted the time. I saved it to a new, encrypted drive partition on my laptop. Action 2. I went to my inbox. I typed Aurora Skies into the search bar. 3 emails popped up. Your flight confirmation, Chicago to Santorini. All 3 were marked as read. My inbox was pristine. They had not deleted them. Deleting is messy. It leaves a trail in the trash folder for 30 days. A rookie mistake. I looked at the folder list on the left side of my screen. I scrolled down past work, past finance, past travel. I found it, a folder I did not create. Old receipts. I clicked it. There they were, the 3 confirmations, neatly filed away. Hidden, not deleted. This was concealment. This was intent. I opened one, the full charge, $3,942.16, business class, seat assignments already selected, the full itinerary. I saved all 3 emails as PDFs. I saved the receipts. I saved them to the new, encrypted drive. I named the folder Case File, Miles. I was documenting, building a case. My mind was sharp, clear, and cold. And right at that moment, as I stared at the evidence of grand larceny committed by my own parents, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Mom. I read the words, "Thank you for the dream trip for the family. I knew you were the only one generous and understanding enough. I love you." The audacity, the sheer, calculated audacity of it. The text was the final piece of the puzzle. It was the justification. The emotional manipulation sent after the crime was committed and the tracks were covered. The shock finally hit me, not as heat, but as a deep, profound cold. I remembered the group chat, just last week. Miles' Summer Escape 2027. My mother's cheerful, manipulative messages about Santorini. My vague, non-committal replies. I had shut it down. I had said no. I had assumed it was over. I had assumed no was an acceptable answer. I was wrong. I stood motionless in my perfect, quiet apartment. The sun was rising now, casting long, clean lines across the floor. My coffee was cold. My work suit was waiting. I held the phone in my hand, the glowing text message feeling like a brand. The question that hung in the silence was no longer if they did it. The question was not even how they did it. I looked at the hidden folder, at the changed password, at the 2:17 a.m. transaction time. They did not just get lucky. They did not just use my card. They had practiced this. They had been in my accounts before. How long? How long had they been practicing for this? How long had my entire life been their open ledger? The notification that started it all arrived exactly 7 days ago, interrupting a quiet Tuesday evening spent reconciling a complex asset sheet for a pharmaceutical client. My phone had buzzed on the desk, a single, innocuous vibration that I almost ignored. When I finally turned it over, I saw that I had been added to a new group chat. The title of the group was Miles' Summer Escape 2027. Before I could even open the application to see who was included, the first message appeared, sent by my mother, Linda. Paisley has generously volunteered to treat the whole family to a European summer vacation. Everyone needs to vote right now. Are we feeling the white roofs of Santorini or the cliffs of Amalfi? I stared at the words, blinking, trying to make the sentence rearrange itself into something logical. There were 18 people in this chat. My parents, my brother Logan and his wife, my aunts, my uncles, and a sprawling list of cousins ranging from college students to toddlers. I had not volunteered. I had not suggested a trip. I had not even spoken to my mother in 3 weeks, not since a brief, 5-minute call where she asked how to reset her Netflix password. But the reaction in the chat was instantaneous. It was a dopamine feedback loop of excitement. Heart emojis, party poppers. Oh my God. Paisley, you are an angel. Santorini. Definitely Santorini. I have never been to Europe. I am literally crying right now. Thank you. Cousin. The wall of text moved so fast I could not type a rebuttal. By the time I had unlocked my phone, there were already 40 messages praising my generosity and debating the merits of Greek wine versus Italian pasta. I felt a familiar tightening in my chest, the physical sensation of a trap snapping shut. If I spoke now, if I typed, "I did not say this," I would not just be correcting a mistake. I would be the villain snatching a dream away from 18 people. I exited the group chat and opened a private message to my mother. My fingers were stiff. I typed clearly, "Mom, what are you doing? I never said I would pay for the whole family. I told you specifically last year that if we ever did a trip, I would pay for myself. That is it." I watched the 3 little dots dance as she typed. Then they stopped. She did not text back. She video called. This was a tactical move. In a text, there is a record. In a text, I can reread her words and find the contradictions. On a video call, she can use her face, her tone, and the chaotic background noise of her life to overwhelm the facts. I hesitated, then accepted the call. Linda's face filled the screen. She was in her kitchen, the yellow light unflattering, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked flushed, happy, and completely unbothered by my panic. "You are such a worrier," she said, before I could even say hello. Her voice was a warm, rolling laugh. "You always panic about the details before you see the big picture." "I am not panicking," I said, keeping my voice level. My forensic auditor voice. I am clarifying. I cannot afford to send 18 people to Europe. That is tens of thousands of dollars. Mom, you have to tell them it is a mistake. She took a sip of wine and shook her head, looking at me with a pitying expression, as if I were a toddler refusing to eat vegetables. "Paisley, honey, you are forgetting. We talked about this at Christmas. You stood right there by the fireplace, with Logan and your dad, and you said, "Mom, stop worrying about money. Let me handle the trip. You just plan it." We all heard you. I stared at her. The sheer confidence of the lie was breathtaking. "Mom," I said slowly, "I was not at Christmas." She paused, the glass halfway to her mouth. "I was in Seattle for the tech audit, remember? I sent gifts by mail. We FaceTimed for 10 minutes while I was eating room service. I was not physically in the house." For a split second, I saw a flicker of annoyance in her eyes, the computer processing a glitch, but Linda Miles does not retreat. She pivots. "Well, maybe it was Thanksgiving then." She waved her hand dismissively. "Or maybe it was on the phone. The point is, you said it. You made a promise. And now everyone is so happy. Did you see Nate's message? He's never been on a plane. Paisley, are you really going to call your cousin and tell him he can't go because you're being stingy?" "I am not being stingy," I said, my grip tightening on the phone. "I am being realistic. I have a car loan. I am saving for a down payment on a house. I do not have unlimited funds." "You have a good job," she shot back, her voice sharpening. "You are a big city auditor. You live in that glass tower alone. You don't have kids. You don't have expenses like Logan does. It's just money. Paisley, family is what matters." I ended the call. I had to, or I would have screamed. I sat in my silent apartment, breathing hard. I told myself this was just her talking. It was just talk. She could not force me to pay. My money was in my bank, protected by my passwords and my authorization. 2 days later, the notification came for a mandatory family Zoom. I debated not joining, but the auditor in me needed to know the scope of the situation. I needed to assess the damage. I logged on at 7 p.m. sharp. The screen was a grid of chaos. Aunt Marianne was yelling at her dog. Uncle Dave was adjusting his camera angle so we could only see his forehead. Logan and his wife were wrangling their 2 toddlers, who were screaming in the background, and in the center square, presiding over it all like a conductor, was my mother. She clapped her hands. "Okay, everyone, settle down. Paisley is here." All eyes, or at least the webcams, turned to my square. I sat against the neutral gray wall of my home office, wearing a button-down shirt. I looked like I was in a deposition. They looked like they were at a party. "We have been looking at flights," Linda announced, beaming, "and honestly, it is not even that bad. I found a great deal. It comes out to about $860 a person." $860. I did the math instantly in my head. Chicago to Santorini in high season? That price was impossibly low for a direct or even a one-stop flight on a reputable carrier. It had to be a budget airline with 3 layovers, or a mistake fare. "That is manageable," Aunt Marianne chirped. "Right?" Linda nodded vigorously. "And here's the thing. I know times are tight. So, Paisley and I talked." I stiffened. We had not talked. "And," Linda continued, looking directly into the camera lens, staring right at me across the internet, "since Paisley is doing so well, and since she is the only one without the burden of a family to support, she is going to handle the bookings up front to secure the price. If you can chip in, great. If you cannot, well, we don't want anyone left behind because of money. We are the Miles family. We stick together." The silence that followed was heavy. I unmuted my microphone. "Mom," I said, my voice cutting through the static. "I cannot do that." The smiles on the screen faltered. "I cannot float $15,000, I said, calculating 860 times 18, and $860 sounds incredibly low. Are you sure that includes taxes and baggage? Because if it doesn't, the price doubles. I am not agreeing to this." Linda's face dropped into a mask of tragic disappointment. She looked like a kicked puppy. "Paisley," she whispered, loud enough for the microphone to pick up. "Don't do this. Not in front of everyone." Then Logan spoke up. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, a toddler pulling at his shirt. Come on," he said. "It's $800. You make that in 2 days? We are drowning here. We just want one nice week." just one. It was a calculated strike. My brother knew exactly where to hit. He knew I felt guilty for leaving our hometown, for escaping the cycle of debt and bad decisions that trapped them all. He weaponized my success against me. I looked at the grid of faces, my cousins, looking hopeful, my aunts, looking expectant. They didn't see a forensic auditor setting boundaries. They saw a walking ATM who was refusing to dispense cash. I sent a private message to the chat moderator, my mother, but she ignored it. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin Nate. "Hey Paisley, I know it's a lot to ask, but I really need this. I've been depressed lately. I thought this trip was a sign things were getting better. Please." The emotional blackmail was coming from every angle. It was a coordinated attack. Whether they realized it or not, Linda had wound them up, pointed them at me, and pulled the trigger. I took a breath. "I'm not saying I don't want to go," I said carefully. "I am saying I cannot pay for everyone. I can pay for myself. Maybe I can help with Mom and Dad's tickets, but I cannot cover the whole family." Linda sighed, a long, loud sound of martyrdom. Okay. Paisley is stressed. She works very hard. You know, she gets anxious about numbers." She was dismissing me. She was invalidating my refusal by labeling it as a symptom of my personality. "Let's not pressure her," Linda said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Everyone just get your passports ready. I will work out the logistics with Paisley offline. She always keeps her word in the end. She is just having a moment." She ended the Zoom call before I could object again. I sat staring at the blank screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. The screen went black, reflecting my own face back at me. Pale, tight-lipped, controlled. In the group chat, which was still active, Linda posted a final message. "Don't worry, everyone. Paisley is on board. She just needs to move some funds around. Start packing." I muted the chat. I turned off my phone. I went to the kitchen and scrubbed my counters until they gleamed, trying to scrub away the feeling of slime. I convinced myself that night that it was just talk. Linda often made grand plans that evaporated when the bill came due. She would look at the actual cost, realize she couldn't bully me into a $20,000 wire transfer, and the trip would quietly die. It would become another almost memory, another thing they blamed me for ruining, but at least my bank account would be safe. I believed that my refusal was clear. I believed that no meant no. I believed that without my credit card number, she was powerless. Standing in my kitchen now, 7 days later, with the morning sun hitting the stainless steel, I realized how naive I had been. I looked down at the PDF receipts on my phone. The tickets were not $860. They were $3,942.16 each. They were not for the whole family. They were for Ray, Linda, and Logan. The $860 figure was a lie. It was a bait number. A low enough figure to get the family to pressure me, to make me look unreasonable for saying no. It was never real. She never intended to book economy seats for 18 people. She wanted business class for her favorites. She used the chaos of the group chat, the pressure of the Zoom call, and the guilt of the family to create a smokescreen. She made me focus on the 18 people problem, so I wouldn't see the identity theft problem coming. While I was busy defending myself against being called stingy, she was busy guessing my security questions. While I was worrying about hurting Nate's feelings, she was navigating my password recovery options. I scrolled back through the chat history on my phone, reading her messages with a new, horrifying clarity. Paisley is on board. She just needs to move some funds around. I will work out the logistics. These were not optimistic wishes. These were statements of intent. She wasn't hoping I would pay. She was announcing that she was going to take the money. The pieces of the past week clicked into place with the satisfying, terrible sound of a lock engaging. The emotional manipulation had just been the distraction. The real crime was happening in the background, silent and digital. I looked at the timestamp on the Zoom call from 5 days ago. It was 7 p.m. I looked at the login history on my Google account. There was a failed login attempt 5 days ago at 7:15 p.m. She had been trying to hack me during the family meeting. She had been smiling at me on camera, telling the family I was just stressed, while her hands were likely on a second device, typing in variations of my childhood pet's name. This was not a crime of passion. This was a cold, calculated extraction. I lowered the phone. The apartment felt different now. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was a crime scene, and the perpetrators were the people who had taught me to tie my shoes. I walked over to my laptop, opened a new spreadsheet, and typed the first entry. Date, current, event, unauthorized transaction, amount, $11,826.48. Suspects, Linda Miles, Ray Miles. I stared at the cursor blinking in the cell. The forensic auditor in me was fully awake now. The daughter was still somewhere inside, huddled in the corner, crying. But she would have to wait. I had a file to build. I let the phone dial, holding it to my ear with a perfectly steady hand. The cold, sterile tone of the hold music filled my apartment. My suit for work was still hanging on the valet stand. I had not moved. I had not showered. I had only logged data. A voice clicked on the line. Thank you for calling Pioneer National Trust. My name is David. How can I help you today? My voice was clear, crisp, and devoid of any emotion. It was the voice I used for client calls. Hello, David. I am calling to report 3 fraudulent transactions on my checking account. Account number ending in 4772. The transactions are identical, each in the amount of $3,942.16, all made at 2:17 this morning to a merchant listed as Aurora Skies. David's keyboard clicked. I see those transactions, ma'am. They are still in a pending state. Can you confirm you did not authorize these charges? I can confirm, I said. I was asleep. Furthermore, I have evidence that my personal email was compromised at approximately 4:30 a.m., and the password was changed using a recovery email that does not belong to me. More clicking. Okay, I see the notes here. This is a very high-value fraud. We will definitely open an investigation. Now, ma'am, for a charge like this, we need to know, do you have any idea who might have made these purchases? This was the question, the pivot point. I could lie. I could say, I have no idea. It must be a stranger. The bank would investigate. It would be a standard case, but the evidence trail, the IP address, the recovery email, would lead back to my parents. The bank's fraud department was just as competent as I was. Lying would make me an accomplice after the fact. It would be a false report. I am a forensic auditor. I do not lie about data. Yes, David, I said. I do. The purchases were made by my mother, Linda Miles, using my credentials, which were obtained without my permission. A pause, a long, heavy silence from David's end. This was no longer a simple fraud claim. Ma'am, he said, his voice shifting from customer service to legal caution. I am very sorry to hear that. That changes the classification of this case. This is what we call familial fraud, or known party fraud. Because you know the perpetrator, Pioneer National Trust cannot simply absorb the loss as we would with an unknown third party. I knew this. I had audited cases like this. In order to dispute these charges and not be held liable for the $11,826.48, he continued, you will be required to file a formal police report for identity theft against the known party. There it was, the line. File a police report against my mother, against my father, whose name was on the ticket. For a single, agonizing moment, the auditor receded and the daughter surfaced. I saw myself at 19, standing at a bus stop in the snow after a late-night shift at the campus library. Because my gas tank was empty and my paycheck was still 2 days away, I remembered eating instant noodles for a week straight to afford a textbook, because my student loan disbursement was late. I remembered the shame of my card being declined for a $7 sandwich. All those years, I had told myself it was character building. I had told myself I was paying my dues, learning the value of a dollar that my family, with their chaotic spending, never had. Now, I saw those memories through a new lens. Had my mother been buying new shoes while I was skipping meals? Had my dues been paying for their comforts? The image of my 19-year-old self, shivering in the dark, made the decision. That girl had worked too hard to be stolen from. My voice was flat. I understand. David, I will file the report. Please proceed. I want the card associated with this account frozen immediately. I want all online and mobile access locked down, requiring a new in-person verification, and I want the dispute process initiated on all 3 charges. Yes, ma'am, David said, his efficiency restored. We will freeze the account now. We will also contact Aurora Skies to inform them the payment is fraudulent and is being recalled. You will receive a dispute package in the mail. Please attach a copy of the police report as soon as you have it. I will, I said, and ended the call. My next call was to Aurora Skies. I navigated their automated system with cold efficiency. I reported the tickets as fraudulent. I gave them the bank's transaction IDs. The agent confirmed the tickets would be flagged, canceled, and the funds held pending the bank's formal recall. I had done it. I had pulled the plug. I had cauterized the wound. I sat back, my entire body humming with a cold, clear adrenaline. It was done. And then, the storm broke. My phone, silent for the past hour, lit up like a Christmas tree. It was a cascade of notifications, so fast they blurred together. A text from Linda. My tickets are canceled. The bank just called me about fraud. Fraud. What did you do? Answer me, Paisley. You are ruining this. This was a gift. How dare you do this to your own mother? Call the bank and fix this. You tell them you made a mistake. You tell them you forgot you authorized it. Fix this. A text from Ray. Paisley, your mother is hysterical. I am getting alerts that our flight is on hold. This is a simple misunderstanding. You need to call the airline and the bank right now and correct your error. This is embarrassing. Do it now. And then, from Logan, What's going on? Mom is screaming. Dad says you reported them to the bank? She just wanted a vacation. Can't you just talk to them? Why would you do this? It's just money. Please don't make this a legal thing. Just call them. It's just money. The phrase echoed in my head. It had been the anthem of my childhood. It's just money was the excuse for every late bill, every collections call, every empty promise. It's just money was what they said when they took. It's just money was what I said when I saved. To them, it was an abstract concept, a river that flowed and ebbed, mostly ebbing. To me, it was a tangible thing. It was hours of my life. It was units of my time. It was the food I did not eat, the sleep I did not get. It was not just money. It was my life. I turned my phone on silent. I placed it face down on the counter. The buzzing continued, a frantic, desperate vibration against the stone. I did not go to work. I called my director and told him I had a severe personal emergency and would be offline. He knew my work ethic. He knew my record. He simply said, "Take the time you need. Let me know if you need anything." The rest of the day was a blur of security. I changed every password I had, not just my email, but every single account, utilities, credit cards, streaming services, my 401k, my employee stock program. I enabled two-factor authentication on everything that offered it, using a secure app, not my phone number. That evening, my apartment was dark, lit only by the blue-white glow of my laptop. I was not just changing passwords, I was auditing my life. This was no longer about $11,000. This was about scope. I opened my secure financial software. I began downloading my bank statements, not just for the past month, but for the past 5 years. I exported them all to CSV files. I did the same for my 2 credit cards. I logged into my cell phone account, my internet account. I pulled every piece of data I could. I created a master spreadsheet. I began to filter, to sort, to cross-reference. I filtered for all transactions under $50. The big ones are easy to spot. The small ones are where the real patterns lie. And I found them. A charge for $15.27, a convenience store. I looked up the address. It was 2 blocks from my parents' house. The date was from a Tuesday. 3 months ago, I was in the office, in a 6-hour meeting. A charge for $22.90, a gas station, in their town. A charge for $9.99, a service fee for a streaming app I did not use. Another, and another. It was a slow, steady drain. A parasite. They were financial nibblers, siphoning off small, ignorable amounts, knowing I was too busy, too focused on my career, to notice a few dollars here and there. My blood ran cold. I kept digging. I went back to my security checks. I logged into my Amazon account. I checked the account settings, my name, my address, my primary card, and there, listed as a backup payment method, was my mother's credit card, and listed as a secondary email address, l.miles.mom@oldmail.net. She had linked our accounts. I checked my PayPal, the same, my old eBay account, the same. She had built a digital backdoor into my life. I remembered all the times. "Oh, Paisley, you're so bad with technology. Let me just set up that account for you." "Let me help you, honey. It's faster if I just type in the information. Just give me your card. I'll put it in when we're at the store. It's easier." Every single time she had helped, she had been planting a seed. She had been adding her email, linking her accounts, giving herself a key. She had been building this network for years. This was not a one-time desperate act for a vacation. This was the culmination of a long-term, systemic, and deliberate abuse of my financial identity. The vacation was not the goal. It was just the biggest, most brazen withdrawal she had made to date. I opened a new, secure encrypted file on my work computer, the kind I used for high-level corporate fraud cases. I named it Miles, Internal Fraud Case. I began to log the evidence, screenshots, timestamps, transaction IDs, IP addresses, the text messages from my mother, father, and brother. I was building my case. I was preparing my police report. Then I pulled my full credit report from all 3 bureaus. Not the free consumer score, but the deep file. The screen loaded. My score was excellent, over 800. I had worked tirelessly for that number. I scrolled down. Accounts, Pioneer National Trust, credit card, status, open, Pioneer National Trust, checking, status, open, Department of Education, student loan, status, closed, paid in full, Atlas 401k, status, open, auto loan, status, open. And then, one I did not recognize, consumer credit app, personal loan, original amount, $5,000, date opened, October 14th, 2 years ago, balance, paid in full. I stared at the screen. $5,000. I had never taken out a $5,000 personal loan. I checked my work calendar for that date. October 14th, 2 years ago. I was in Denver. I was the keynote speaker at the annual compliance conference. I had been on stage almost that entire day. I went to the app's website. I used the forgot password function, using my own email. The password reset link came to me. They had not been smart enough to change that. I got in. I found the loan agreement, loan number, date, my name, my social security number, and at the bottom, the digital signature. Paisley M. Miles. It was my name, but it was not my signature. I knew that handwriting. I had seen it on every birthday card, every permission slip, every check I had ever received. The loop on the P, the high, sharp peak of the M, it was my mother's. She had not just stolen my money, she had stolen my name. She had committed forgery. I looked at the paid in full status. How? I went back to my bank statements. I searched for the $5,000 payment. I found it. It was a transfer from my savings account to the loan app, dated 6 months after the loan was opened. She had taken out a loan in my name, used the money for God knows what, and then used my own savings to pay it back before I noticed. I leaned back in my chair, the spreadsheet glowing in the dark. The scope of it was staggering. This was not a few dollars. This was not a vacation. This was my entire financial life, and she had been treating it as her own personal slush fund for almost a decade. I spent the next 6 hours in a state of cold, focused energy. I had a single, encrypted file open. I did not eat. I did not pace. I sat at my dining table, the city skyline turning from the bright, flat light of morning to the deep, golden tones of late afternoon. My spreadsheet was no longer just a list of transactions. It was a complex web. I had created pivot tables. I had cross-referenced dates of my travel for Atlas with the dates of suspicious logins. I had mapped out the entire digital network my mother had built inside my life. I had just finished documenting the $5,000 fraudulent loan when the sound came. It was not the polite, electronic buzz from the intercom in the lobby. My name was on the directory. Anyone could have buzzed. This was a bypass of that system. This was someone who had managed to get a key fob from the concierge, or had followed another resident in. It was a knock on my apartment door. Not a polite tap-tap. It was a heavy, percussive thump-thump-thump. A pause, then thump-thump-thump. The sound vibrated through the steel-frame door. I felt it in the floor. My father, Ray Miles. That was his knock, the knock of a man who believed any door he stood in front of should already be open for him, the knock of a man who had not been told no by his family in decades. My heart, which had been beating with a slow, cold rhythm, gave a single, painful jolt. This was it. The emotional wave was here to breach the walls. I stood up. My hoodie was still on from the night before. I slid my phone from the counter. I opened the audio recording app. I pressed the red circle. A small timer began to tick upward. I slid the phone into the deep front pocket of the hoodie. My hand rested on it. Just barely. My fingers curled. I knew the law. Minnesota is a one-party consent state. I was the one party. I was consenting. I walked to the door. I did not look through the peephole. I already knew who was there. I unlocked the deadbolt. The snick of the metal retracting sounded incredibly loud in the silent apartment. I opened the door. He was exactly as I pictured, Ray Miles, his face a mask of thunderous rage. He was shorter than I remembered, but he still tried to fill the doorway. His shoulders squared in his worn denim jacket. He did not wait for an invitation. He stormed past me, invading my clean, orderly space. "What did you do?" He did not ask. He growled it. "You canceled the tickets?" I closed the door, the latch clicking shut with finality. I leaned against it, putting the solid steel at my back. I kept my voice perfectly, dangerously, quiet. I reported fraudulent transactions, yes. Fraudulent? He spun around, his keys jangling in his hand. He gestured wildly at the air. "It was a family trip. Your mother has been crying all day. Crying. Do you understand that? You broke her heart." He was pacing now, on my polished concrete, his dirty work boots leaving scuffs of mud. I watched the scuffs. They were data points. "You will call that bank," he commanded, jabbing a finger at me. "You will call them, and you will tell them you made a mistake. You will tell them you were confused, and you will get those tickets back. Do you hear me?" I did not move. I did not raise my voice. I asked a simple, technical question. "Can you explain something to me, Dad?" He stopped pacing. The quietness of my tone threw him off. "Can you explain," I continued, "why those tickets were booked on my account, using my debit card, at 2:17 in the morning? And can you explain why the recovery email on my personal Gmail account was changed to Mom's old mail address 1 hour later?" His bluster faltered. It was like watching a big sail suddenly lose the wind. His face went from red to a blotchy, confused white. "What? What are you talking about? Emails?" He was trying to catch up. He had not been briefed on the digital evidence. He had only been briefed on the emotion. "Your mother told you she bought tickets," I said. "She did not tell you she committed identity theft to do it." "Identity theft?" He tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. "That is ridiculous. It's your mother. Money in a family is family money. It all goes to the same place." No, it does not, I said. My money goes into a 401k and a high-yield savings account so I can buy a home. Your money goes… Where… Exactly. Where did the $5,000 go? I had not meant to say that. It slipped out. The auditor, seeing an opening. 5,000? He looked completely lost. He had no idea about the loan. He was just the muscle, sent in to fix the immediate problem. My mother was the analyst. He was the enforcer. He shook his head, defaulting back to his script. This is not about $5,000. This is about you. You live in this place. He waved at my apartment, at the skyline. This sterile box. You live all alone. You make more money than all of us combined, and you cannot find it in your heart to help your family, to give us one nice thing? Help is something you ask for, I said. Taking is something you do in the dark, at 2:17 a.m. We did ask, he yelled. We had a family meeting. We told you. You were just being difficult. You asked me to cover $860 per person, I said, pushing off the door, taking one step toward him. A number that was a lie from the start. You didn't ask me to buy 3 business class tickets for almost $4,000 apiece. His eyes widened. He genuinely had not known the number. 4,000? $3,942 each, I confirmed. That is an $11,800 charge. Dad, that's a $9,000 difference from the number you quoted to the family. How… exactly. Were you and Mom planning to pay for that $9,000 discrepancy? Or was that just family money too? He was trapped. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing. He had come here to yell at a stingy daughter. He was now facing a forensic auditor who had receipts. He did what he always does when cornered by facts. He attacked the person. We deserved one nice thing, he finally spat, his face flushing red again. Just one. But you wouldn't know about that. You have to count every penny. You are just like a computer. A cold, broken adding machine. You always have been. My job is to count pennies, I said, and I am very good at my job. I walked past him to the counter, picked up my tablet, and woke the screen. It was my master spreadsheet. Because I count the pennies, I said. I also noticed the other things, the small things. I looked at him. He was watching me, wary now. The balance of power in the room had shifted. My apartment, my data, my rules. Like the $15.27 at the corner store by your house, on my card. That was just an accident, he stammered. Your mother must have grabbed the wrong card. And the gas? $22.90, in your town, when I was in Seattle. She was probably just borrowing it, he said, his voice weak. She would have paid you back. Like she paid back Aunt Marianne for the roof repair? The name hit him like a physical slap. He actually flinched. His eyes darted to the door, then back to me. What? What does Marianne have to do with this? I am just wondering, I said, my voice casual, as if I were asking about the weather. You all seem to use each other's money so freely. I was just wondering if that was family money too. The $6,000 for the roof that Marianne paid for but does not remember authorizing, or the small loan Nate apparently has that he did not know about. It seems to be a very normal thing in this family. He was caught. The look on his face was pure, unadulterated panic. He had known. He had known about all of it. He was not just an enforcer for my case. He was an accomplice in all of them. That's just normal, he finally whispered. That is how families are. We help each other. We borrow. You wouldn't understand. You cut yourself off from us. I am done, I said. The finality in my voice made him look up. I have already contacted the bank. Dad, the charges are being disputed. The tickets are canceled. The account is frozen. You can unfreeze it, he said, trying to regain his footing. No, I said. I am going to the police tomorrow morning. I am filing a full report for identity theft and wire fraud. complete with the digital signature from the $5,000 loan I just found. His color drained completely. Police? Paisley. No, you cannot. You would be. That is your mother. She was my mother when she forged my signature, too. I said. This will destroy us, he shouted, finding his voice again, but it was hollow, brittle. This will destroy the family. If you file a report, my God, Paisley, no one will ever speak to you again. Your aunts, your cousins, Logan, you will be alone. You will have no one. You are tearing this family apart. He was pleading now. The threats were all he had left. The emotional, nuclear option. You will be alone. I looked at him, at this man who had crossed the city to bully me into accepting a nearly $12,000 theft. This man who knew his wife was stealing from her sister and her nephew. This man who stood by and called it normal. I felt a sudden, strange, bottomless pity, but it was quickly replaced by something harder. Ice. The family was already destroying me, I said, my voice quiet, but it filled the space between us. You were just doing it slowly. A few dollars here, a broken promise there, a forged loan. I turned back to my laptop screen, where the case file was still open. I am just not letting it happen for one more dollar. He stared at me for a long, terrible moment. I did not look back. I just looked at the numbers on the screen. He was looking at his daughter, but I was not his daughter anymore. I was an auditor, and he was a liability. I heard his breathing, ragged and defeated. I heard him turn. I heard his keys jangle as he fumbled for the doorknob. I heard the door open, and then slam shut with a force that rattled the glass in my windows. I stood there. The silence that rushed in to fill the space was absolute. It was clean. I reached into my pocket and stopped the recording. I saved the file. Ray Miles, M4A. Then my legs gave out. I did not fall, but I sank. I slid down the side of my kitchen island until I was sitting on the polished concrete floor, my back against the cool steel. I looked at the scuff marks his boots had left. I looked at my laptop, still glowing on the table above me, the spreadsheet, the rows of numbers. He had called me a computer, an adding machine. He meant it as an insult. But as I sat there, on the floor of my silent apartment, I had never been more grateful for it. The numbers had not lied. The numbers had not gaslit me, or manipulated me, or called me stingy. The numbers had told me the truth, and for the first time in my entire life, I realized that the numbers were not my burden. They were my shield. The Minneapolis 3rd Precinct was not designed for comfort. It was a building of linoleum floors, fluorescent lights that hummed with a headache-inducing frequency, and the smell of stale coffee mixed with floor wax. I walked in at 8:15 in the morning, wearing my charcoal suit, carrying a waterproof document binder. I did not approach the front desk like a daughter. I approached it like a senior forensic auditor presenting to a board of directors. When Officer Miller called my name, he looked tired. He held a clipboard loosely in his hand, expecting, I assumed, a domestic dispute involving a shouting match or a stolen lawnmower. We sat at a metal desk in a corner of the bullpen. I placed the binder on the desk. I opened it to the first tab. I would like to report a case of identity theft, wire fraud, and forgery, I said. He sighed, clicking his pen. Okay, who is the suspect? Linda Miles and Ray Miles, I said. My parents. Miller stopped clicking. He looked up, his expression shifting to that familiar mix of pity and dismissal I had seen on the faces of bank tellers and customer service agents all my life. Look, Miss Miles, he said, leaning back, we get a lot of these. Family disputes over money. You lend some cash. They don't pay it back. You get mad. That is a civil matter. You need small claims court, not a police report. I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice. I turned the binder around so it faced him. This is not a loan, I said. This is a timeline of unauthorized access to my federally insured financial accounts. I pointed to the first document, Exhibit A, Bank records showing 3 transactions totaling $11,826.48, executed at 2:17 in the morning while I was asleep. I flipped the page. Exhibit B. Digital forensic logs from Google showing a password change on my personal email account 1 hour later, utilizing a recovery email address belonging to Linda Miles. This proves premeditated access and intent to conceal. I flipped the page again. Exhibit C. A copy of a personal loan agreement for $5,000 taken out 2 years ago in my name. The funds were dispersed to an account I do not own. The digital signature does not match my signature on my driver's license, which I have provided here for comparison. Officer Miller was no longer leaning back. He was leaning forward, reading the loan agreement. And finally, I said, sliding my phone onto the desk, Exhibit D, an audio recording taken yesterday evening at 5:45 p.m. inside my apartment. I pressed play. The sound quality was crisp. My father's voice, angry and entitled, cut through the precinct noise. Money in a family is family money. It all goes to the same place. Then, my voice asking about the difference in ticket prices. Then his voice again, admitting knowledge of other financial irregularities involving my aunt. I stopped the recording. Officer Miller looked at me. The pity was gone. In its place was the sharp, assessing look of a law enforcement officer who realizes he has a slam-dunk case sitting in front of him. "This is not a civil dispute," he said quietly. "No," I agreed. "This is theft." He spent the next hour typing. He took my statement. He logged the evidence. He gave me a case number on a small, carbon copy slip of paper. It felt light in my hand, but I knew the weight of it. This number was a grenade. Once I pulled the pin, I could not put it back. "Be prepared," Miller said as I stood to leave. "When we contact them for questioning, or if the district attorney decides to press charges, they are going to react. Family fraud cases are the ugliest things we see. They do not de-escalate. They explode." "I know," I said. "I am counting on it." By the time I got back to my car, I had an email from Pioneer National Trust. The subject line was Provisional Credit Applied. The $11,826.48 was back in my account. The email contained a standard boilerplate paragraph stating that their investigation was ongoing and that they would be pursuing the recovery of funds from the merchant or the responsible party. In banking terms, responsible party meant the person who actually spent the money. My mother was about to receive a very expensive letter from the bank's legal department. I sat in my car, the engine idling, staring at the case number in my hand. I felt a strange hollowness. I had expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text message, not from my parents, not from Logan. It was from Aunt Marianne. Marianne was my mother's younger sister. She was the kind one, the soft one, the one who always slipped me $20 when I was in college and told me to buy something nice for myself. She and Linda were inseparable. "Paisley," the text read, "I hope you are okay. Your mom called me. She is saying some really scary things about you having a breakdown, but I just checked my bank statement." I stared at the screen. I typed back, "What did you find?" 3 dots danced. "There is a charge from last month," she wrote. $6,200 for home repair services. Linda told me she knew a guy who could fix my roof cheap. She handled the payment for me because she said she had a discount code. But I called the roofing company just now. They said the bill was only $4,000, and the charge on my card went to a shell company I don't recognize. I closed my eyes. It was the skimming scheme. She overcharged family members for help and pocketed the difference. It was elegant, in a sick way. "And Paisley," Marianne added, "the date of the charge is the same day Linda bought that new patio set she posted on Facebook." I felt a surge of nausea. My mother had not just stolen from me, the rich daughter. She had stolen from Marianne, a widow living on a pension and Social Security. Before I could reply, another message came through. This one was from my cousin Nate. He was 24, a sweet kid who worked 2 jobs and was trying to buy his first decent car. "Hey, cuz," Nate wrote. "Is it true you called the cops on Aunt Linda?" I hesitated. I reported a fraud. Nate, why? Because I am at the dealership, he replied. They just ran my credit. They denied me. They said my debt-to-income ratio is too high. Paisley, I don't have any debt, but the guy showed me my report. There is a personal loan for $3,000 opened last year. It is listed as delinquent. I gripped the steering wheel. Nate, I typed, think carefully. Did Mom ever ask for your information? Social security number? Driver's license? She helped me file my taxes last year, he wrote back. She said she could get me a bigger refund. The pattern was not just a line. It was a web, a sprawling, sticky web that caught everyone who trusted her. She used helping as a Trojan horse. She filed taxes. She booked repairs. She set up accounts. And every time she did, she took a slice. Then came the message that hurt the most. It was from Logan, my brother, the golden child, the one who had told me to just pay the money because it is family. I am sorry, his text read. Just 3 words. I checked my credit karma. He continued. I have been trying to refinance the house for months and kept getting rejected. I thought it was just the economy. I looked at the details today after I heard about you. There are 4 credit cards in my name that I do not have. One of them is maxed out. He sent a screenshot. The balance on the card was $8,400. She told me she was paying them off. Logan wrote, she told me she just needed to use my name because her credit was bad. But she would handle the payments. She swore on her life. She hasn't paid a cent in 6 months. I looked at the phone. My brother, who defended her, who guilt-tripped me, was the biggest victim of them all. He was drowning in debt she created, and she had convinced him to protect her while she held his head under water. I drove home in a daze. My apartment was no longer just a command center for my own case. It was becoming a war room for the entire Miles family. I opened my laptop and updated the master file. I added a new tab for Marianne, a new tab for Nate, a new tab for Logan. The dollar amount at the bottom of the spreadsheet ticked up. 11,000, 17,000, 20,000, 38,000. This was grand larceny. This was a federal crime. I worked through the afternoon, fielding texts, asking for screenshots, compiling the evidence. I felt a grim sense of purpose. I was no longer the daughter throwing a tantrum. I was the auditor uncovering a Ponzi scheme where the currency was familial trust. Around 6 in the evening, my phone pinged with a notification from the family group chat. I had muted it, but I had not left. I needed to see the enemy's movements. Linda had posted a long message. Family, she wrote, I am so heartbroken to have to say this. Paisley is going through a severe mental health crisis. The stress of her job has finally broken her. She is suffering from paranoid delusions and financial anxiety disorder. She has convinced herself that the family is stealing from her. She even went to the police with these crazy stories. Please, if she contacts you, be gentle, but do not believe her. She is sick. We need to pray for her. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She was inoculating the herd. She knew the truth was coming out, so she was poisoning the well before the water could be tasted. By labeling me crazy, she discredited my evidence before anyone could see it. I watched the reactions roll in. Sad faces, praying hands, poor Paisley, working too hard. We love you, Linda. Stay strong. She was winning, even with the truth on my side. She was winning the narrative because she played on their emotions, while I only had cold, hard facts. But then, a new message appeared in the chat. It was from Aunt Marianne. Linda, Marianne wrote, I do not think Paisley is sick. The chat went silent. No emojis, no reactions. I have my own bank statements, Marianne continued, and Nate has his credit report, and Logan has his bills. We are all seeing things that do not add up. The text bubble from Linda appeared, then disappeared. She was typing, then deleting. She was panicking. I think, Marianne wrote, that we need to stop texting. We need to meet, all of us, this Sunday, at my house. Linda replied instantly, Marianne, do not bring everyone into this. This is private. It stopped being private when you used my credit card to fix my roof and charged me $2,000 extra, Marianne replied. Sunday, 6 p.m. Everyone be there. We are going to hear both sides. I stared at the screen. Marianne, the quiet one, the follower, had just drawn a line in the sand. I typed my own reply, my fingers steady. I will be there, and I am bringing the receipts. The emergency family meeting was set. I leaned back in my chair. The sun had set, casting my apartment in shadows. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was the feeling of an approaching storm. I looked at the stack of papers on my desk, the police report, the bank affidavits, the spreadsheet. Linda thought this was going to be a shouting match. She thought she could cry and guilt her way out of it, like she always did. She thought she was walking into a family therapy session. She was wrong. She was walking into an audit, and I was the lead investigator. The living room of Aunt Marianne's house in the suburbs was arranged like a tribunal, though my mother clearly believed it was a stage. The furniture had been pushed back against the walls, creating a semicircle of chairs facing the center. In the middle sat Linda, clutching a wad of tissues, her posture slumped to convey maximum fragility. My father, Ray, stood near the hallway entrance, arms crossed, his eyes darting around the room like a security guard expecting a riot. I sat on a folding chair near the window, my leather satchel on the floor beside me. I had not spoken since I arrived. I simply nodded to my aunts, uncles, and cousins, took my seat, and waited. The air smelled of stale pot roast and nervous sweat. Marianne cleared her throat. She looked tired, her eyes red-rimmed. She was the judge of this court, but she looked more like a reluctant executioner. Okay, everyone, Marianne said, her voice trembling slightly. We are all here. Linda, you wanted to speak first. Linda lifted her head. She looked around the room, making eye contact with every single person except me. When she spoke, her voice was a masterpiece of wavering sorrow. I just want to say I am sorry we are all here like this, she began. I never wanted to burden the family. You all know how much I love you. You know I would give you the shirt off my back. She paused for effect. A few of my younger cousins nodded sympathetically. The truth is, Linda continued, turning her teary gaze toward me, Paisley has been under a lot of pressure lately. Her job, it is very dark. She deals with criminals all day. I think it has started to affect her mind. She is seeing enemies where there is only love. She is forgetting things. She promised us this trip, and then she forgot. And when I tried to remind her, she snapped. She blew her nose loudly. It was only $860 a ticket, she sobbed. That is all it was. A budget fare so we could all be together. And now she is calling the police over a few $100s? She is having a breakdown. I am not angry at her. I am just worried. We need to get her help, not listen to these paranoid delusions about theft. The room was silent. The narrative was compelling. It painted me as the unstable, overworked corporate drone and her as the concerned, loving mother. My cousin Chloe, a college sophomore who had always looked up to Linda, spoke up. Her voice was hesitant but accusatory. Paisley, she said, looking at me, if it was really just $800, I mean, you make a lot of money. Why call the cops on your own mom? Why couldn't you just help? It feels really mean. I felt the eyes of the room shift to me. They were weighing the story. They saw a crying mother and a cold, silent daughter in a designer suit. The optics were not in my favor. I did not get angry. I did not defend my character. I did not tell Chloe that I had paid for her textbooks last semester. I did what I do in a boardroom when a CEO lies about his quarterly earnings. I let them finish the lie, and then I presented the ledger. I stood up. The movement was slow and deliberate. I picked up my satchel. I took out a thick stack of paper, clipped together with a heavy black binder clip. I walked over to Aunt Marianne. I handed her half the stack. Then I walked over to Uncle Drew, Marianne's husband. Drew was a contract lawyer, a man who respected fine print. I handed him the other half. Please look at the first page, I said. My voice was calm, flat, and carried to every corner of the room. Uncle Drew, can you please read the transaction line item highlighted in yellow? Read the merchant, the date, and the amount, out loud, please. Drew adjusted his glasses. He looked at the paper. He frowned. Then he squinted, bringing the paper closer. Merchant is Aurora Skies. Drew read, his voice deep and confused. Date is the 17th of this month. Amount is $3,942.16. A ripple of murmurs went through the room. And the next line? I asked. Same amount, Drew said. And the third line? Same amount. I turned to the room. That is nearly $12,000. I said, not 860. Those are business class tickets. Linda sat up straighter. Her tears stopped instantly. She waved her hand dismissively. That is a computer error, she cried out, her voice sharp. It was a display glitch on the website. I told you. I clicked the economy seats. The system must have charged the wrong amount. I was going to call them and fix it, or I would have paid the difference later. You know I am not good with technology. It was a weak lie, but in a family that wanted to believe the best, it might have been enough. I saw doubt on a few faces. Maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe Linda really was just clumsy with a mouse. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, cylindrical Bluetooth speaker. I placed it on the coffee table in the center of the room, right in front of Linda. I connected my phone. Errors happen, I said, but intent does not happen by accident. I pressed play. The sound was crystal clear. It was the recording from my apartment hallway, amplified so that every breath, every inflection was audible. My father's voice boomed into the living room. We deserve to live well for once. You live alone. You make more than everyone. Why shouldn't you help? Then my voice, calm and distant in the recording. Do you know the difference between $860 and $4,000? Then Ray again. Who cares? Money in a family is family money. And then, the dagger. The line I had been waiting for them to hear. Why are you making such a big deal? Your mother uses Marianne's card sometimes for things and she never complains. It is normal. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was not the polite silence of before. It was a vacuum. It was the sound of oxygen being sucked out of the room. All eyes turned to Marianne. She was staring at the speaker, her face pale, her mouth slightly open. The paper I had given her was trembling in her hand. Marianne? I asked gently. The roof repair last spring. How much did Mom say it would cost? Marianne looked up at Linda. Her expression was one of pure, dawning horror. She said she knew a guy. She whispered. She said it would be $4,000. She said she would put it on my card to get the points and I could write her a check for the deductible. I nodded. Look at page 4 of the packet I gave you. Marianne turned the pages. Her hand was shaking so hard the paper rattled. The charge is for $6,200, I said, and the merchant is not a roofing company. It is a Shell LLC registered to an address in Delaware. Marianne looked at the paper, then at Linda. You told me it was a discount, Marianne said, her voice cracking. You told me you were helping me. Linda stood up. Her face was patchy and red. I was, she shouted. I was helping. I handled the contractors. I did the work. I deserve a commission for my time. You people think everything comes free. That was the crack in the dam. From the back of the room, my cousin Nate stood up. He was shaking. And my car loan? Nate asked, his voice rising. The one you helped me apply for? The one that got rejected yesterday because I apparently already have a $3,000 personal loan I never signed for? Was that your commission too, Aunt Linda? Linda spun around to face him, baring her teeth like a cornered animal. I borrowed that for your grandmother's medication, she lied. I was going to pay it back. Then Logan stood up. My brother. He had been sitting with his head in his hands. He stood up slowly, looking like an old man. Stop it, Mom, Logan said. Just stop. Linda looked at him, her eyes wide. Logan, honey, My credit score is 420, Logan said. 400? I cannot refinance my house. I cannot get a Target card. There are 4 credit cards in my name. Mom, 4. You told me you were fixing my credit. You told me to trust you. You have spent almost $9,000 in my name. The room was in chaos. The semicircle had broken. People were standing, shouting, checking their phones, looking at their own banking apps with panic in their eyes. The illusion of the benevolent matriarch had not just cracked, it had shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. Linda looked around, her head whipping back and forth. She had lost control of the room. She had lost control of the narrative. She turned to Ray, who was still standing by the door, looking terrified. "Do something!" she shrieked at him. Tell them we needed it. You are the man of the house. Why are you just standing there? You never protect me. You are useless." Ray flinched as if she had hit him. It's over. He stammered. Uncle Drew stepped into the center of the room. He was no longer the kindly uncle. He was a lawyer. He held up the packet of papers I had given him. "This is not a family dispute," Drew said, his voice cutting through the noise. "This is wire fraud. This is identity theft. This is elder abuse in Marianne's case. These are felonies, multiple felonies." Linda looked at Drew, then at me. The hate in her eyes was absolute. It was a pure distilled venom. "You," she hissed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You did this. You ungrateful, cold-hearted bitch. I gave you life. I raised you. And this is how you repay me? Over money?" I looked at her. I felt nothing. No fear, no guilt. Just the cold satisfaction of a balanced equation. "I repaid you by not pressing charges for the first 10 years of theft I didn't know about," I said. "Consider that my gift." Linda let out a scream of frustration. She grabbed her purse from the floor. "Come on. Ray," she commanded. "We are leaving. I am not staying here to be insulted by these people." She turned and marched toward the hallway, expecting the sea to part as it always did. She expected them to move aside, to let her storm out, to let her play the victim one more time. But they didn't move. My Aunt Sarah stood in front of the hallway. My cousin Nate stood next to her. My brother Logan stepped in front of the door. For the first time in the history of the Miles family, the enablers did not move. The walls they had built to protect her had turned into a cage. "Move," Linda warned. "No," Marianne said. She was still sitting in her chair, holding the bank statement, tears streaming down her face, but her voice was iron. "No," Marianne repeated. "You are not going anywhere. We are not done looking at the papers." Linda stopped. She looked at the wall of family blocking her exit. She looked back at Ray, who hung his head. She looked at me, sitting calmly by the window with my Bluetooth speaker. She realized then what I had known since I walked in. This wasn't a meeting, it was an arraignment, and she had already been found guilty. 2 weeks after the tribunal in Aunt Marianne's living room, the silence from my parents broke. It did not break with an apology, and it did not break with a check. It broke because the machinery of the banking system had finally ground its gears in their direction. Pioneer National Trust had finished their preliminary review. They had determined that the dispute was valid, the evidence of unauthorized access was substantial, and the liability lay with the account holders who had benefited from the transaction. They sent a formal demand letter to Ray and Linda Miles, requiring immediate repayment of the $11,826.48, plus interest and investigation fees, to avoid further legal escalation. The letter must have arrived on a Tuesday, because that was when the texture of the harassment changed. For the first few days after the family meeting, Linda had played the victim card in the group chat, posting vague, sad quotes about betrayal and the pain of a mother's heart. But when the bank demanded actual money they did not have because they had spent decades spending mine, the mask of the martyr slipped. She stopped posting quotes. She started sending threats. Her messages arrived in bursts, usually late at night, fueled by wine and panic. "You will regret this," she wrote. "You think you are so smart with your spreadsheets. You are going to lose everyone. If we lose the house because of this lawsuit, it is on your head. Your father is sick with worry. Do you want to kill him?" I archived every message. I did not reply. I was a forensic auditor. I knew that engagement only generated noise. I needed signal. Silence was my strategy. But silence, to a narcissist, is not a boundary. It is a challenge. It was a Thursday morning, crisp and cold, the kind of Minneapolis morning where your breath hangs in the air like smoke. I drove to the Atlas Compliance Group headquarters downtown. This building was my sanctuary. It was a tower of glass and steel where rules were respected, where logic prevailed, and where my last name meant senior auditor, not daughter. I pulled into the parking garage, swiping my badge with the satisfying beep of authorization. I parked my car on the third level, gathered my laptop bag, and walked toward the elevator bank that led to the lobby. I walked out the glass doors of the garage and toward the main entrance of the building. And there it was, the silver SUV. It was parked illegally in the loading zone, right in front of the revolving doors. The engine was idling, pumping white exhaust into the chill air. I knew that rattle. I knew that dent on the rear bumper from when my father backed into a mailbox 3 years ago. My heart hammered against my ribs. A sudden, violent reaction that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with invasion. They were here. They had crossed the line. They had brought their chaos to the one place I had kept meticulously clean. I considered turning around. I could go back to my car, drive home, and work remote. I could hide. But then I looked at the revolving doors. Beyond them were my colleagues, my director. The career I had built from scratch while eating instant noodles and working 3 jobs. If I turned around now, I was letting Linda and Ray Miles take this from me too. I tightened my grip on my leather bag. I kept walking. The driver's side door of the SUV flew open. Ray stepped out. He looked older than he had 2 weeks ago, his face gray and unshaven. Then the passenger door opened, and Linda scrambled out. She was wearing a coat that was too thin for the weather, her hair specifically styled to look frantic. "Paisley!" she called out. Her voice echoed off the concrete and glass. A few employees walking into the building glanced over. I felt a flush of hot shame, the old reflex of wanting to cover for them, to hush them, to make the scene go away. I forced the shame down. I replaced it with cold, hard data. I stopped walking about 10 feet from them. I did not smile. "What are you doing here?" I asked. Linda rushed forward, closing the distance, forcing a smile that looked like a rictus of pain. "Honey," she said, her voice pitchy and loud, "we just need to talk. You won't answer your phone. We drove all the way here. We just need 5 minutes." "I have to work." "Mom," I said, "I am not discussing this here." Ray stepped up beside her. He looked at the building, then at me. He was playing the reasonable man role today. "Paisley, be reasonable," he said. "We got a letter from the bank. They are talking about legal action. They are talking about garnishing wages." "You committed fraud," I said. "That is what happens when you commit fraud." Linda winced, looking around to see if anyone heard the F word. "It was a misunderstanding," she hissed, dropping the volume but increasing the intensity. "Look, we can fix this. All you have to do is call them. Right now. Just call the investigator. Tell him you remembered. Tell him you gave us permission and you just forgot because of stress. That is all it takes. Paisley, 1 phone call, and the file goes away. The family stays together." She reached out to touch my arm. I took a step back. "I am not lying to a federal institution for you," I said. Ray's face darkened. The reasonable man vanished. "You are going to let us lose the house?" he asked, his voice rising. "Over tickets? We raised you in that house, and you are going to let the bank take it? What will the neighbors think? What will people say about you? Paisley, that you are the daughter who sued her own parents?" He gestured toward the building behind me, toward the stream of professionals walking in with their coffees. "What will your fancy colleagues think?" Ray asked, a sneer curling his lip. "Do they know you are doing this? Do they know you are mentally unstable and attacking your family?" There it was, the threat. It was subtle, but it was sharp. He was implying that if I did not comply, they would make a scene. They would drag my reputation through the mud right here on the sidewalk. They would tell my boss, my peers, anyone who would listen, that Paisley Miles was a hysterical, cruel, ungrateful daughter. Linda picked up the thread instantly. "I was thinking of going inside," she said, her eyes glinting with malice. "I bet your boss is a nice man. Maybe if I talk to him, explain that you are having a breakdown, he will understand why you are acting like this. I should probably warn him that you are under so much stress." My blood went cold, not from fear, but from clarity. They were willing to burn down my livelihood to save their own skins. They were willing to destroy the one thing I had that was truly mine. 2 employees from the legal department walked by. They looked at me, then at the idling SUV, then at the woman with the wild hair. I saw the curiosity in their eyes. This was the moment I had always feared, the dirt of my private life smearing onto the glass of my professional life. But as I looked at Linda, standing there with her chin raised in a challenge, I realized something. She did not know who I was here. She knew Paisley the daughter, the doormat. She did not know Paisley the senior forensic auditor. She thought she was threatening a child. She did not realize she was threatening a compliance officer. I took a step forward. I invaded her personal space. "Do it," I said. Linda blinked. "What?" "Go inside," I said, my voice steady and lethal. "Go find my director. His name is Mr. Henderson. His office is on the 14th floor." I pointed at the revolving doors. "Go tell him I am unstable. Go tell him I am having a breakdown. But before you do, you should know something about my company." I held her gaze. I did not blink. "We specialize in fraud detection," I said. "We literally write the software that catches people who steal money. If you walk into that lobby and start talking about my finances, you are not just talking to a boss. You are talking to a room full of people who prosecute financial crimes for a living." I saw Ray shift his weight. He looked at the security cameras mounted above the entrance. "If you try to damage my reputation here," I continued, keeping my voice low enough that they had to lean in to hear it, "I will not just file a police report. I will hand over my entire case file to the Atlas Legal Department. I will let them use you as a case study. I will show them the forged signatures. I will show them the shell company you used to rip off Aunt Marianne. I will show them the credit card fraud on Logan's account." Linda's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Mr. Henderson loves a real-world example," I said, "so please, Mom, go inside. Be my guest. Let's see who they believe. The auditor with the timestamps and the IP logs, or the woman who is currently being chased by the fraud department of Pioneer National Trust." Linda's face turned a color I had never seen before. It was a mix of purple and ash. The bluff had not just been called, it had been incinerated. She looked at the doors. She looked at the security guard standing inside the lobby. She looked at me. You ungrateful little witch," she screamed. It was loud. People stopped. "I gave you life," she shrieked, her hands balling into fists. "I wiped your nose. I fed you. And you treat me like a criminal? You will die alone. Paisley, you hear me? You will rot in that apartment with your money and your spreadsheets, and no one will come to your funeral. No one." She was making a scene. She was doing exactly what I feared. But it didn't matter, because I wasn't afraid anymore. I stood there, calm and immovable, watching her unravel. Ray grabbed her arm. He saw the security guard inside the lobby put a hand to his earpiece. He saw the employees taking out their phones. "Linda, stop," Ray hissed. She pulled away from him. "I hate you," she yelled at me, spit flying from her lips. "I wish I had never had you." "Linda, get in the car," Ray shouted. He yanked her hard, almost pulling her off her feet. "There are cameras. Look at the cameras." He dragged her toward the SUV. She was still screaming curses, a stream of vitriol that sounded less like words and more like the noise of a drowning animal. Ray shoved her into the passenger seat and slammed the door. He ran to the driver's side, threw himself in, and gunned the engine. The silver SUV peeled away from the curb. tires screeching, leaving a cloud of exhaust and the smell of burning rubber. I stood on the sidewalk. My heart was racing, but my hands were steady. A colleague from the tax department, a woman named Sarah, walked up to me. She looked concerned. "Paisley, are you okay? Do you need security?" I took a deep breath. The air was cold and clean. "No," I said, "I am fine. Just a case I'm closing out." I walked into the building. I went up to the 14th floor. I sat at my desk. I did not open my work email immediately. Instead, I opened a new browser tab. I searched for Family Law Attorney Minneapolis. I spent my lunch break on the phone. I did not hire a cheap lawyer. I hired a specialist from a firm that dealt with high-conflict divorces and financial restraining orders. We drafted the letter that afternoon. It was not a polite request. It was a cease and desist order. It outlined, in excruciating legal detail, the events of the past month. It listed the fraudulent transactions. It listed the police case number, and then it laid out the boundaries. Mr. and Mrs. Miles are hereby prohibited from contacting Ms. Paisley Miles via telephone, text message, email, or social media. Mr. and Mrs. Miles are strictly prohibited from approaching Ms. Miles's place of employment, residence, or any public venue where she is known to be. Any further attempt to disparage Ms. Miles's professional reputation to her employer will be considered tortious interference and defamation, and will result in immediate civil litigation for damages. We sent it via certified mail. Return receipt requested. We sent a copy to the bank. We sent a copy to the police detective, Officer Miller, to add to the file. It was 5:30 in the evening when I finally stood up from my desk. The office was quiet. Most people had gone home. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window that looked down over the city. I could see the entrance to the building, 12 stories down. The spot where the silver SUV had been parked was empty. I pressed my hand against the cool glass. For 31 years, I had been afraid of that car. I had been afraid of the knock on the door. I had been afraid of the phone ringing. I had lived my life in a state of preemptive flinching, waiting for the next crisis, the next demand, the next emotional explosion. I looked down at the empty pavement. They were gone, and they were not coming back. I had not just defeated them with facts. I had defeated them with the very thing they mocked. I had defeated them with professionalism. I had defeated them with boundaries. I realized then that my office was not just a place where I worked. It was a fortress, and for the first time, I felt like the queen of my own castle. I turned away from the window, picked up my bag, and walked to the elevator. I did not look back. There was nothing behind me worth looking at. The cease and desist letter was a legal wall. It stopped the texts, the calls, and the ambushes at my office. But it did not stop the consequences. My parents had set a financial time bomb, and by reporting the fraud, I had simply handed the bomb squad the case file. About a month after the incident at my office, the bomb went off. Pioneer National Trust, having received no payment and no response to their demand letter, did exactly what their policy dictated. They filed a civil lawsuit against Linda and Ray Miles for the full $11,826.48, plus legal fees. This lawsuit was not a quiet, private matter. It was a public record. And in the world of finance, a lawsuit for fraud is like a drop of blood in shark-infested waters. It triggered a cascade of cross-default clauses. A cross-default is a provision in a loan agreement that puts a borrower in default if they default on another, unrelated loan. My parents, it turned out, were leveraged to the hilt. The first call I got was from a tearful Aunt Marianne. She said Ray had called her, begging her to co-sign a new emergency loan, the bank that held the note on his small furniture business. Miles Interiors had seen the lawsuit from Pioneer. They had immediately frozen his line of credit. Without that line of credit, Ray could not make payroll. He could not buy new inventory. He was running on fumes. Logan called me 2 days after that. His voice was flat, hollow. Dad had to lay off his 2 employees. Logan said, He is liquidating all his floor models at 50% off just to keep the lights on. I felt a pang of something, but it was not guilt. It was a cold, distant pity. I had not done this. I had simply turned on the lights in a room where they had been committing crimes in the dark. The repercussions for Linda were less financial and more social, which, for her, was a fate worse than death. Her country club membership, the one she flaunted in every Facebook post, was apparently tied to the same line of credit as the furniture store. When Ray's credit was frozen, the club automatically suspended her privileges for non-payment. According to Marianne, who still heard whispers from that side of the family, Linda's upper-crust friends, the women she played golf with and had wine nights with, evaporated. They were not loyal to Linda. They were loyal to the appearance of wealth. Once that appearance was gone, so were they. The Miles family officially fractured. It split right down the middle, like a house sliding into a sinkhole. One half of the family, mostly older aunts and uncles who were terrified of legal trouble and still believed Linda's Paisley is crazy narrative, retreated. They sent me a few stiff, formal texts about praying for everyone and hoping this resolves itself quietly. Then, they stopped inviting me to things. I was excommunicated. The member of the herd who had drawn the attention of the predators, they cut me off, not because they thought I was wrong, but because I was dangerous. But the other half, the victims, coalesced around me. Logan, Nate, and Marianne. We became an island. My relationship with Logan, which had been strained for a decade by his role as the family's emotional shield, transformed. He stopped seeing me as a rival for our parents' non-existent approval and started seeing me as a resource. I sat with him at my dining table one Saturday afternoon. My laptop open between us. We pulled his credit report. It was a wasteland. The 4 fraudulent cards, the late payments she had forgotten to make. His score was, as he had said, in the low 400s. "Okay," I said, switching into full auditor mode. "This is your recovery plan." I built him a spreadsheet. It was not a complex forensic file. It was a simple, forward-looking budget. Step 1, I told him, we file fraud affidavits with all 4 credit card companies. We attach my police report as supporting evidence. This will get the accounts off your file. Step 2, we call your existing real creditors, the mortgage, the car loan. We negotiate a new payment plan. Step 3, you get a secured credit card with a $200 limit. You will use it once a month, for gas, and pay it off in full. He just stared at me, his eyes wide. How do you just know all this? Pays? It is my job, I said. I analyze systems. Your credit is just a system. It is broken. We are going to fix it. He left my apartment 6 hours later with a binder of his own. A look of grim determination on his face I had not seen since we were kids. A new ritual began to form. Marianne started hosting survivors' dinner every Sunday, the same night the disastrous family meeting had taken place. It was just the 4 of us. Me, Marianne, Logan, and Nate. There was no pretense. There was no walking on eggshells. At the first dinner, Marianne served lasagna, and we just sat there, eating in silence for a few minutes. Then Nate spoke up. She told me she was helping me file my taxes, he said, staring at his plate. She said she could get me a bigger refund. I gave her my social security number. I feel so stupid. You are not stupid. Nate, Marianne said, putting her hand on his. You were trusting. That is not a character flaw. I used to cover for her, Logan admitted, his voice low. When we were teenagers, she would bounce a check at the grocery store. She would tell me to go back in and pay for it with my lawn mowing money, and she would promise to pay me back. She never did. I got used to it. We spent 3 hours that night, not just listing our financial injuries, but excavating the emotional ones. We shared memories. The time Linda forgot her wallet on Marianne's birthday. The time she borrowed Logan's high school graduation money. The time she told me my scholarship was just luck and that I owed her for it. We realized that none of us had been the only one. We were not isolated failures. We were a network of victims, and she had kept us apart by making each of us feel uniquely ashamed. by bringing us together. She had inadvertently given us the one thing she could not defeat: solidarity. After that first dinner, I went home and started writing. I did not just document the financial fraud. I documented the emotional tactics, the gaslighting, the guilt-tripping, the "it's just money" dismissal, the "family is everything" weapon. I showed the document to Marianne the next week. It was 12 pages long. She read it, her face pale. "Paisley," she said, this is everything. You have to share this." I laughed. "Share it with who? It is a family's dirty laundry." "No," she said, her eyes intense. She pointed out her living room window, toward the lights of the town. "There is a community center down the street. They do evening workshops, retirement planning, gardening 101. You should do one." "On what?" I asked. "How to sue your mother?" "On financial abuse," she said. "Call it protecting your pockets, recognizing financial abuse in families. Call it whatever you want, but people need to hear this. We are not the only family this is happening to." The idea was terrifying. It meant taking my private, excruciating trauma and making it public. But then I thought about Nate at the car dealership. I thought about Logan, drowning in debt. I thought about myself at 19, shivering at the bus stop. If I could save one person from that, was it not worth it? The first workshop was on a rainy Tuesday. The community center gave me a small classroom with a flickering fluorescent light and a stained carpet. 15 people showed up. They were mostly older women, but there were a few young men who looked a lot like Nate, and one woman my age who looked as tired as Logan. I did not use my parents' names. I did not use my family's names. I just used the data. I put up a slide. What is financial abuse? I put up another. The warning signs. Using guilt to demand money. Borrowing without asking. Opening accounts in your name. Using your social security number for help. Dismissing your financial boundaries by saying, "It's just family." With every slide, the room got quieter. I saw people nodding. I saw a few take out notepads. I told an anonymous story about a woman who was asked for $860, but was stolen from for nearly $12,000. I told a story about a young man who could not buy a car because his relative had helped him with his taxes. When I finished, no one clapped for a moment. Then an elderly woman in the back row raised her hand. Her voice was shaking. "My son. He lives with me," she said. "He gets my mail. He says he is managing my bills. But my savings account seems to be getting smaller, even though I have not taken anything out. Am I crazy?" "You are not crazy," I said. "You are a victim, and you have a right to see your own statements." After the talk, 3 people stayed behind. One was the elderly woman. Another was a young man who whispered that his brother had borrowed his identity to get a cell phone plan. The last was a woman my age, who simply asked for the name of my lawyer. I walked to my car that night feeling a strange, draining, powerful sense of purpose. I was heartsick that these stories were so common, but I was electrified that my own by-T-tier experience could be an antidote for someone else. The news of my workshop, of course, got back to Linda. It came via a message from one of the neutral aunts, the one who was still speaking to both sides. "Paisley," the text read, "your mother is furious. She heard you are going around town, telling stories and slandering the Miles name. She says you are profiting from her pain." I laughed. Profiting. The workshop was free, but her reaction was all the confirmation I needed. She was not angry because I was lying. She was furious because I was telling the truth. And the more she raged, the more she proved my point to the remaining family members who were still on the fence. Her anger was her final, unintentional confession. That Sunday, I was back at Marianne's. She had made chicken. Logan had brought a salad. Nate brought a cheap bottle of wine he had bought with his first paycheck from a new job. We sat around the small kitchen table. It was not a grand dining room. The plates did not match, but the laughter was real. Logan was telling a story about his toddler, and Nate was joking about a bad date. I looked around the table, at Marianne, her face relaxed, smiling, at Logan. the dark circles under his eyes starting to fade. At Nate, who was looking at his new, secured credit card like it was a gold medal. This was it. This was the family my mother had always accused me of not wanting, the one I had been looking for all along. It was not a group of people bound by blood and obligation. It was a group of people bound by shared trauma, mutual respect, and a very clear, shared spreadsheet of recovery. I raised my glass of cheap wine. "To balanced budgets," I said. "To balanced budgets," they echoed. And as I sat in that warm, bright kitchen, listening to them laugh, I realized it was the first time in my entire 31 years that I had ever felt truly, completely, and unconditionally safe at a family dinner. 8 months. That is how long it has been since I stood on the sidewalk outside my office and watched my parents screech away, leaving me in a cloud of their exhaust and rage. 8 months of silence, enforced by a cease and desist letter. 8 months of rebuilding. My apartment looks different. From the outside, it is the same. The same glass tower, the same clean lines, the same view of the Minneapolis skyline, but inside, the fortifications are visible. There is a new, high-end security system, one that is not linked to any email address my mother ever knew. There is a small, fireproof safe bolted to the floor of my closet. Inside it are my passport, my birth certificate, my social security card, and my new bank credentials, physical documents, offline, under lock and key. The biggest change is in the corner of my living room. What used to be an empty space with a single, sculptural chair is now my workshop. It is a command center. There is a new laptop, used only for this purpose, a mini projector, a filing cabinet. The drawers are not filled with corporate fraud cases. They are filled with neat tabbed folders. Financial literacy basics, identity theft 101, understanding credit reports, how to spot emotional manipulation. My own finances are, for the first time in my adult life, exactly what they appear to be. The car loan, which I had been aggressively paying down, is finished. I made the final payment 3 months ago, a full year ahead of schedule. My savings account, no longer suffering a slow parasitic drain, has grown at an exponential rate. My credit score, which I check weekly, has ticked over into the excellent category. It is a number I built, a number I protected, and a number that is mine alone. The most meaningful changes, however, were not happening in my own accounts. About a month ago, my phone buzzed with a text from Logan. It was not a plea for help or a lament about our parents. It was a screenshot. It was from a credit monitoring app. His score, which had been a catastrophic 420, had just climbed to 650. "It's not great," he wrote, "but it's not subprime volcano anymore." A second text came through. It was a picture of a piece of plastic, a credit card. It was a basic, no-frills card from a local credit union. "Approved," his message read. $500 limit. It's the first one that's ever just had my name on it. Thank you. Pays. For the spreadsheet. I stared at that picture. A $500 limit. It was nothing. It was everything. Nate's victory came a week later. The bank, after reviewing his affidavit and the supporting evidence from my police report, had finally approved his dispute. The $3,000 fraudulent loan, the one that had been tanking his credit, was officially removed from his file. "I'm at 0, he texted me, the words followed by a dozen party emojis. "It feels amazing to be at 0. I'm not in the hole anymore." I had not just saved myself, I had pulled them out of the quicksand with me. We were starting over, not from a place of shared blood, but from a shared, clean ledger. My work life shifted, too. The incident in the parking lot had not gone unnoticed. My director, Mr. Henderson, had called me into his office the following day. I had expected a reprimand for bringing personal issues to work. I walked in, prepared to be disciplined. He told me to close the door. "Paisley," he said, steepling his fingers on his desk, "I am not going to ask what happened in the parking garage. That is your business. But I will say this. The legal department was impressed." Impressed, sir? The cease and desist letter your attorney drafted, he said, a small smile playing on his lips. It was forwarded to our general counsel as a courtesy, since it mentioned the company. He called it a masterpiece of precise retaliation. He said it was as clean and lethal as a balance sheet. He leaned forward. I know what you do here, Paisley. I know your work. But seeing how you handled, let's call it a hostile takeover of your personal assets. It confirms what I already thought. You are not just a good auditor, you are unflappable. You do not let emotion cloud the data. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was an offer letter. Senior Forensic Auditor, he said. It's a 15% raise, and you will be leading the new Internal Risk Assessment Division. Your first job is to teach our junior auditors how to think like you. I walked out of his office with a new title and the strangest sense of validation. The very things my family had always mocked me for. My coldness, my obsession with numbers, my lack of heart, were the exact things my career was rewarding me for. The world, it turned out, valued a woman who could hold a boundary. My world was no longer just Atlas in my apartment. It was the community center classroom. Twice a month. My workshops had grown. The first one had 15 people. My last one had 50. I had been invited onto a local podcast, Minneapolis Money, to talk about a subject they had never covered before: financial abuse within middle-class American families. We talk about fraud from strangers, the host said, her voice earnest. But we never talk about fraud from your mom or your brother. How do you even begin to have that conversation? You don't, I said, the words coming easily now. You stop seeing it as a conversation. A conversation implies that both parties are willing to listen. This is not a conversation. This is an extraction. You are dealing with someone who does not respect your boundaries. So you do not talk. You document. You create a boundary made of data. You create a wall made of facts. And you defend it. The feedback from that podcast was overwhelming. My inbox was flooded with stories. People sent me their own spreadsheets, their own tales of borrowed cards and forgotten loans. At my next workshop, the room was standing room only. I was telling the anchor story, the one that had started it all. He told me the tickets were $860, I said, pacing in front of the small group. That was the lie. It was a believable lie. It was designed to make me look stingy for saying no. But the truth? The truth was on the bank statement. The truth was $4,000 per ticket. The room was dead silent. I could hear the hum of the vending machine in the hall. They count on you being too polite to check, I said. They count on you being too embarrassed, too guilty, too bound by family to ever pull the receipt. They are using your love as a smokescreen for their theft. In the back row, an elderly woman in a nice cardigan, a woman who looked like she baked cookies and volunteered at the library, was crying. She was not making a sound, just silent, steady tears rolling down her cheeks. After the talk, she waited until everyone had left. My son, she whispered, clutching her purse to her chest. He moved in with me after his second divorce. He helps me with my finances. I thought I was getting forgetful. My pension seems to run out faster every month. He told me it was inflation. I looked at her, and I saw myself. I saw Nate. I saw Logan. Last week, she continued, a letter came from a credit card company I did not recognize. He got the mail before I did. He said it was just junk mail, but he looked scared. Your story, the tickets, the way they lie to your face, that is my son. I gave her the card for my lawyer. I gave her the name of a financial planner who specialized in elder care. I went home that night and stared out my window. I finally understood what this was. The pain of the last year had not been about the money. The $11,000 was just a number. It was the betrayal. It was the realization that the people who were supposed to be my safe harbor were, in fact, the pirates. It was the loss of trust. It was the discovery that my entire life had been built on a foundation of lies. And what I was doing now, in these workshops, was not just teaching people about spreadsheets. I was giving them permission to believe themselves. I was telling them that they were not crazy for asking questions. I was telling them that "it's just family" was the most expensive lie they would ever be told. I looked over at my desk. Taped to the monitor was a small index card. I had written it after my promotion, in my own, neat, all-caps handwriting. It said, "Money is not the issue. Control is the issue." It was my new mantra. It was the reason I had not just accepted the loss. It was the reason I had filed the police report. It was not about the dollars. It was about the right to my own life. I was sorting my mail, getting ready for bed. When I saw it, it was a thick, formal envelope from the Hennepin County District Court. It was not a threat. It was not junk mail. It was a summons. I opened it. My hands were perfectly steady. It was an official notification. The civil suit, Pioneer National Trust v. Miles, was scheduled for a hearing in 3 weeks. And at the bottom of the page, my name was listed. Key witness, Paisley M. Miles. I held the letter in my hand. I thought back to that morning, 8 months ago, when I had seen the bank alerts and my world had imploded. I remembered the panic, the cold, the feeling of my apartment being a crime scene. I looked at the letter again. I felt nothing. No, that was not true. I felt something. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was not even sadness. It was resolution. My heart was not pounding. It was steady. It was the calm, steady beat of an auditor who is about to close her biggest case. This was not a threat. This was a line item. It was the final entry in a long, complicated ledger. This was the end. The Hennepin County District Court was not dramatic. It did not look like the wood-paneled, high-ceilinged rooms I had seen on television. It was a room of beige drywall, flickering fluorescent lights, and rows of uncomfortable benches that smelled faintly of floor wax and anxiety. I sat in the front row. My hands were folded in my lap. To my left sat the legal counsel for Pioneer National Trust, a man named Mr. Sterling, who wore a suit that cost more than my first car. To my right, sitting behind the defendant's table, were Linda and Ray Miles. They looked diminished. That was the first thing I noticed. My mother was wearing her best Sunday dress, a navy blue floral print that she usually saved for weddings, but it hung loosely on her frame. Her hair, usually sprayed into an immovable helmet of blonde ambition, looked thin and tired. My father sat beside her, staring at the grain of the wooden table. His shoulders hunched as if he were expecting a physical blow. They did not look like the titans who had ruled my childhood with fear and guilt. They looked like two elderly people who had gotten lost on their way to the grocery store. Behind me, in the gallery, sat my team, Aunt Marianne, Logan, Nate. They did not wave. They did not smile. They simply sat there, a solid wall of witnessing. Their presence was the only armor I needed. The Honorable Judge Patterson entered. We stood. We sat. The shuffling of papers was the only sound in the room. "This is the matter of Pioneer National Trust versus Linda Miles and Ray Miles," the judge said. Reading from the file, "The case involves allegations of civil fraud, identity theft, and unauthorized access to financial accounts belonging to Ms. Paisley Miles." The judge looked over her glasses at my parents. "I have reviewed the filings," she continued. "We have a claim here stating that over a period of 14 months, the defendants accessed the plaintiff's accounts using fraudulently obtained credentials to fund personal expenses, including travel, luxury goods, and debt repayment." She turned to Mr. Sterling. "Counsel, please call your witness." Mr. Sterling stood up. "We call Ms. Paisley Miles to the stand." I walked to the witness box. I did not look at my mother. I could feel her eyes on me, burning with that familiar mix of rage and desperation, but I kept my gaze fixed on the court reporter's typing hands. I was sworn in. "Ms. Miles, Mr. Sterling began. "Can you walk us through the morning of the 17th? I took a breath. The auditor took over. The emotion drained out of me, leaving only the cold, hard facts. At 5:47 in the morning, I received 3 alerts from my bank. I stated clearly, The alerts indicated 3 transactions of $3,942.16 each. The merchant was Aurora Skies. The timestamp was 2:17 a.m. I described the investigation. I described the password change. I described the recovery email address. I described the spreadsheet I had built, tracing the IP addresses back to the router in my parents' home. I spoke for 20 minutes, and in those 20 minutes, I dismantled my family's history using only dates and dollar signs. Then, Mr. Sterling played the recording. The room went silent as the audio file loaded. Then, my father's voice filled the sterile courtroom, loud and distorted but unmistakable. Money in a family is family money. It all goes to the same place. Then my voice, calm and sharp. Do you know the difference between $860 and $4,000? Then Linda's voice, shrill and defensive. She uses Marianne's card sometimes. It is normal. I saw Aunt Marianne flinch in the gallery, but she did not look away. She kept her eyes locked on Linda's back. When the recording ended, the silence in the room was heavy. It was the sound of a curtain being pulled back. The lawyer for my parents stood up. He was a court-appointed attorney who looked like he had been handed this file 10 minutes ago. He tried to do his job, but he had nothing to work with. "Ms. Miles," he said, looking at his notes, "is it not true that you have helped your family financially in the past?" "Yes," I said, when they asked, "And is it not true that your mother considered these transactions to be a loan? That she intended to pay you back?" I looked at him. "A loan requires an agreement," I said. "It requires terms. It requires consent. Taking money from a sleeping person's account at 2 a.m. is not a loan. It is theft." The lawyer shifted his weight. "But families often have informal arrangements," he pressed. "Your mother claims she thought you would be okay with it because you are successful. She claims this is just a misunderstanding between a mother and daughter." I leaned forward slightly. "My success is not her line of credit," I said. The judge cleared her throat. She looked at Linda. "Mrs. Miles?" the judge asked. Linda jumped. She stood up, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. "Yes, Your Honor." "Did you ask your daughter if you could use her card to buy business class tickets to Greece?" Linda looked at the judge, then at her lawyer, then at me. She opened her mouth to spin a story. I could see the gears turning. She wanted to talk about my stress, about how I was forgetful, about how much she loved me. But this was a court of law. Perjury was a crime, and the recording had just played. We talked about a trip," Linda stammered. "She said she wanted to treat us." "Did you ask her if you could use her card for those specific tickets on that specific night?" the judge repeated, her voice sharpening. Linda looked down at her shoes. "Not specifically, no." "And the $5,000 loan 2 years ago?" the judge asked, flipping a page in the file, the one signed with a digital signature. "Did you ask her for that?" Linda remained silent. "Answer the question, Mrs. Miles." We had a debt," Linda whispered. "It was an emergency. Paisley was doing so well. I didn't want to worry her. I knew I could pay it back before she noticed." "So you admits to signing her name without her presence?" "Yes," Linda breathed. The air left the room. It was over. The confession was on the record. But Mr. Sterling was not done. "Your Honor," he said, "if it pleases the court, Pioneer National Trust would like to submit one final piece of evidence regarding the pattern of behavior. This came to light during our discovery phase regarding the defendant's banking history with our institution." He walked to the bench and handed a document to the judge, then one to the defense table, and finally, he brought one to me in the witness box. I looked at the paper. It was an old document, grainy, scanned from a microfiche archive. It was a withdrawal slip, dated 13 years ago. I read the amount, $12,000. I read the account name, Paisley Miles, Custodial Education Savings. I read the signature on the withdrawal line, Ray Miles. I stared at the paper. My hands started to shake. 13 years ago, I was 18. I was a freshman in college. I remembered that year. I remembered calling my father, crying. telling him my tuition bill was due and the financial aid package hadn't covered it all. I remembered him telling me, with a heavy, sorrowful voice, that they didn't have any money saved for me. He told me business was bad. He told me I would have to take out student loans. He told me I would have to get a job. So I did. I got 3 jobs. I worked the graveyard shift at the campus library. I waited tables on weekends. I donated plasma for grocery money. I graduated with $60,000 in debt that I had spent the last decade aggressively paying off. I looked at the date on the withdrawal slip. It was 2 weeks before that phone call. They had the money. I had a college fund. It wasn't a fortune, but it was $12,000. It would have paid for my housing. It would have meant I didn't have to work the night shift. It would have meant I could have slept more than 4 hours a night. I looked up at Mr. Sterling. "What is the memo line?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Mr. Sterling looked at his copy. "The memo line says emergency debt consolidation," he said. I looked at my parents. Ray was refusing to look up. Linda was crying, but they were silent tears of self-pity. They had stolen my start. They had watched me struggle. They had watched me exhaust myself. They had watched me eat instant noodles and wear holes in my shoes, knowing all along that they had taken the safety net that was meant for me and used it to pay off their own credit cards. The realization hit me harder than the plane tickets. The plane tickets were greed. This was cruelty. This was a theft of time. This was a theft of my youth. I realized then that my entire identity as the responsible one, the hard worker, the grinder, had been manufactured by their theft. I wasn't naturally a workaholic. I had been forced to become one to survive the hole they dug for me. I looked at the judge. She was reading the document. Her face was stern. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She set the paper down. "This court has heard enough," she said. She did not retire to her chambers. She ruled from the bench. "The evidence of fraud is overwhelming and undisputed." The judge stated, "The defendants, Linda and Ray Miles, are ordered to pay full restitution to Pioneer National Trust in the amount of $11,826.48. Furthermore, a judgment of civil fraud will be entered against them. This court also issues a permanent injunction preventing the defendants from opening any financial accounts in the plaintiff's name or acting as authorized users on any of her existing accounts." She paused, looking directly at Ray and Linda. "Regarding the evidence of the custodial account withdrawal and the forged loan documents, I am forwarding this file to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential criminal charges for wire fraud and identity theft. That is not a matter for this civil hearing, but this court cannot ignore the severity of what has been presented." She banged the gavel. Case closed. The sound of the gavel was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a heavy door slamming shut on a dark room. I stood up. My legs felt light. I walked out of the swinging gate of the witness area. I walked toward the back of the room, toward my team. But before I could reach the exit, a hand grabbed my arm. I turned. It was Linda. She was standing there, her face streaked with mascara. Ray was standing behind her, looking at the floor. "Paisley," she sobbed. I pulled my arm away. I did not step back. I stood my ground. "You ruined it," she wept. "We just wanted one trip. We just wanted the family to be together. You ruined everything." She was still doing it, even now, with a fraud judgment on her record and a criminal investigation pending. She was trying to make this about a vacation. She was trying to make me the villain who canceled Christmas. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had spent my college fund. I looked at the woman who had forged my name. I did not feel anger. I felt a profound, exhausting clarity. I did not ruin anything by canceling the trip. "Mom," I said. My voice was calm. It did not echo. It just landed. "You ruined it the moment you decided I was an asset to be liquidated instead of a daughter to be loved." I shifted my gaze to Ray. "And you?" I said. "You watched me work 3 jobs in college. You watched me cry over tuition. And you had $12,000 of my money in your pocket." Ray flinched. He opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to offer an excuse about the business or the economy, but no sound came out. He closed his mouth and looked away. He was small. He was so incredibly small. I turned my back on them. I walked toward the double doors. Marianne was there. She opened her arms. I stepped into them, and for a moment, I let myself be held. I let the auditor rest, and let the daughter, the niece, be comforted. Logan was next. He hugged me so hard my ribs cracked. "It is over," he whispered. "It is over," I said. Nate gave me a high five that turned into a hug. We walked out of the courthouse together. The sun was shining. It was a bright, blinding Minneapolis afternoon. The air smelled of exhaust and city grit, but to me, it smelled like oxygen. We walked to the parking lot. "What do you want to do?" Marianne asked. I looked at them, my chosen family, the people who had seen the spreadsheets and stayed. "I want to eat," I said. "I am starving." "Come to my place," Marianne said. "I will make the roast, the good one." We piled into our cars. I watched in my rearview mirror as my parents walked out of the courthouse. They walked slowly, apart from each other, heading toward their silver SUV. They looked like strangers who happened to be walking in the same direction. I turned my car onto the highway and didn't look back. That evening, Marianne's kitchen was warm, the light was gold, the table was set with mismatched plates. We ate pot roast, we drank cheap wine, we laughed about things that had nothing to do with money. Logan told us about his new credit card and how he had used it to buy gas and immediately paid it off in the parking lot. Nate told us about a girl he met at work. I sat there, looking around the table. For 31 years, I had been told that family was obligation. I had been told that family was debt. I had been told that love was a transaction, and that I was always in the red. But as I looked at Marianne refilling my glass, at Logan smiling with his whole face, at Nate laughing at a joke, I realized the truth. The title of the story was wrong. The flights were not $860 each. The flights were the cost of my freedom, and it was a bargain. I had paid the price. I had balanced the ledger. On the table in front of me, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank, a deposit alert, my paycheck. I smiled. It was my money, every single cent of it. I raised my glass. "To zero balance," I said. "To zero balance," they answered. And for the first time in my life, I was rich. Thank you so much for listening to Paisley's story of justice and reclaiming her life. If you are listening to this on your way to work, at the gym, or maybe while organizing your own spreadsheets, please comment down below and let us know where you are tuning in from. We would love to connect with you. Please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear that it is okay to set boundaries, even with family.